Okay.
Did you find a project yet?
No.
Okay. I think I found my answer to a question I posted last week about why is it not common for people to just send messages within their client, hence their mobile apps, versus always just doing a HTTP post. And you had answered part of it. I think you were saying like, well, if you're only posting, then that may be fine. But if it's a true function, meaning that you're sending information and you need to receive the results of that so that you can move forward, then that's why you would leverage a or a web API. And I understood that part. And then this morning, I always run into this. It's so annoying because we live in that type of world where like I wanted to start testing um, my event store and all the integration updates that I've made, specifically with Azure, like basically posting messages and having my subscribers to those messages just automatically receiving them. And but in order to do that, I had to have a connection string. And the reason why, or you have to have credentials. In this case, for Azure Service Bus, you have to have a connection string. But for the event store, which is something that I also need to wire up because I'm doing this whole integration thing, and all I have to do now is just wire things up. I need like user login and password, and I'm like, okay, I really should not hard code this and then check it into source control in the event that something happens. And because like I wouldn't care because I'm not using my personal password, I'm just using like default for right now. But what I do care about is when I start paying for Azure, because I'm on a free trial right now. I don't want people stealing my Azure credentials, and whether it's them just not liking me or them using it for their own selfish gain, uh, increasing my account balance, right? So I'm like, okay, now I think I understand why it's a common practice to do a web API because it's probably more safer. I didn't say safest, but it's a lot more safer, I think, that if you're going to store any type of secrets, you store it on a server that you have ownership of. Whereas any relatively intelligent developer, they can download your mobile app, decompile it with free tools, and just look for hard coded secrets, and then that could lead to a bad day. So
Yeah. Yeah. So I didn't. I don't think I ever responded to that portion of it. I thought you were strictly talking about server to server communication. Client to server, I would probably never directly use a direct connection to messaging, unless maybe it's like an internal, line of business app or some sort of thing like that. But yeah, I mean, I'd always put some sort of gate, at least a very thin gateway in front of it to receive the message and post it off. Plus, it's much easier to deploy adapters and things to a web API than to have to make sure all of your client apps have the exact same, or have updated schema structures if you were to say break something or do like a breaking change for a new update. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't. Yeah, I think the way you put it though, and the way you described it um, was very good though. Talking about it in terms of authentication, it's a very approachable rule because it makes a lot of sense in terms of if you need to have some sort of authentication around it, it just really doesn't make sense to go to a messaging bus right away.
well, this is what I was going to do for the very first time that uh, a user launches the app. I was going to have a Azure function get triggered in which there's a unique ID from, and maybe I could just retrieve that from the device itself, right? Every device has a couple IDs on it to identify it. So I was considering like the very first time someone launches the app, period, like they simply launch the app, I get some, I get a device ID and maybe the GPS location, right? And I go ahead and execute an Azure function that will return the credentials to connect to my service bus, and at least that's not hard coded. And then I immediately save that into a file. Um, does that sound stupid?
Well, I mean, they could get at that file though too, right? Um, what
Uh,
what
well,
I mean, what it might make sense to do is to write an extremely thin uh, web API to just receive the message and repost it to the service bus, and hide your main credentials behind that. But then, I mean, authentication to the web API is another bit there then, because otherwise people could just post directly to the web service and have the same result. Have you thought about, so that's where you would want to have like rate limits and stuff like that if you can implement that, but it's probably not a concern yet.
yeah.
Um, but have you thought about setting up something with like identity server or something to do that kind of stuff?
The short answer is I'm now thinking about that stuff, but it's more of, here's the thing. I know that architectural decisions can completely ravage a project, right? With the definition of architecture being upfront decisions that are very difficult to reverse. And so that's why I'm like thinking in that mind frame, because I don't want to have to undo a whole bunch of work that I've already done, right? And I feel like right now what we're discussing is me just trading one ceremony in for another one. Um, I was trying to say, hey, why am I going through this complexity of requesting a server just for the server to do something that I could do myself as a mobile client? Why don't I just talk directly to the source, right? And and then I'm like, well, in order to do that, I need to store secrets somewhere. And then I was like, oh, I'm smart. How about I'll just use the server just one time to get my secrets, and I just store that in a SQLite database or on the application properties key value pair storage. And I don't know, at least when they decompile, it's not going to be in the source code. And well, they would just have to, I don't know, do something else. At the end of the day, I feel like no matter what I do, there's always going to be a security concern. Maybe it's just what is enough security for me so that someone just doesn't abuse my Azure account in regards to compute expenses. And it sounds like just bite the bullet, stop trying to be clever, and on your mobile client, just go through a web server and have the web server act as the broker or the middle tier. And that's it.
Yeah.
Which I had originally done. And I spent like 2 days refactoring all that. Well, not 2 days. When I say 2 days, it's 2 hours a day, right? So I spent like four
Yeah.
hours going through all my clients, refactoring all that so that if it's just a post, then they have the clients basically use the Microsoft or the Azure Service Bus on their end. Now I'm undoing that, which I mean, stuff is in source control. I just check in like every 10 minutes, so I just have to find out where I did it at within the timestamps of each change set.
Yeah. So did you change the apps over to using the Azure Service Bus DLLs then?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I might be wrong on this too. I don't know if I trust direct connections to a resource like that without some sort of gateway in front of it. There might be some other proxy tools you could use or something like that to get the same effect too. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I think of the message bus being something more as inter-server communication, not client server. Clients usually want immediate feedback too, because if they fail to post a message, but I suppose technically with a message bus you could fail to post that message and there's guaranteed delivery. So I don't know.
Well,
Yeah.
oh shoot, I'm digging deeper into this. All right, so like the mobile clients, they maintain a subscription. So, for example, the customer, the customer mobile client is going to subscribe to the milestones that are achieved for their delivery, right? For their order to be fulfilled. A milestone being courier received, courier en route, courier at the restaurant, courier leaving the restaurant, courier 5 minutes away, courier is here, that stuff, right? And so if the mobile client is subscribing to that, then I don't have to do a poll, right? I don't have to every 15 seconds or 30 seconds, hey, do I have anything yet? Hey, do I have anything yet? Hey, do I? And that's what I did initially, just to like understand, just to get my integration parts in there and not necessarily solidify. So to get the other components that need to integrate built and tested, but then swap out how the integration points are going to actually, I don't know, connect to each other. And I feel like I still have to have, if I want in order to not pull from a mobile client, I still have to use a subscription or service bus. Or else if I do it on the server and I have my mobile client rely on the server for everything, I don't how do I achieve some type of push?
Have you considered just using SignalR? Azure Service Bus
Yeah.
might be an option for you still. You might just need to lock things down. But yeah, I guess I don't know how to use it in that regard. So, I like I said, I've never really considered it for public facing client server communication. So it could be the right way to do it. I'd go do some fact finding to see if this is a thing or not. But you could use like I said, some sort of you could use SignalR. So when you connect up first, you make a poll request to get any messages you might have missed or whatever for your particular account, and then do from that point on set up your Azure service or your SignalR to just receive the rest of the messages that come through, and then to load balance that you set up a message bus behind that. So, but I don't know. Maybe direct to service bus would be fine. You could maybe even set up a couple service buses and then make one read only and then just bridge them.
Hold on, what's that last part? Why do I have a couple service buses?
Well, if you're worried about secure, well, you could also people could get the same messages, but
originally I'm just worried about my secrets being found in the code base.
Yeah. So just make the secrets irrelevant is what I'm trying to say. Make it so who cares? You wouldn't need to to be able to find the secrets, or like what could you do with the secrets is the question. If you found them, could you just open up a bus and make it so you don't need credentials, or the credentials could be widely known because that's not how the scheme you're using for authentication. You might use like I don't know if you can use really long
I care about the
service names, but
secrets because of the cost of computing using the cloud. That's my main concern.
yeah, for if someone's posting a bunch of crap against the bus,
Yeah,
that's concerning. But if you're worried about receiving push notifications, you could still make Azure Service Bus your push system, right? By just making a read-only bus, and then they can't post to it. So whatever credentials you set up only have the option to consume. They don't have the option to produce messages. And then who cares if the only thing they could do is skim other people's messages if they were able to know which queues to attach to. But you could even find a scheme to probably make that work. Make the queues temporary and shut off, finding and all this other stuff. There's a lot of configuration stuff you could do probably to make it fairly secure,
yeah.
Right? I don't know if it's the right paradigm, but
Yeah.
I would probably look up whatever the general guidance is for how you do push notifications and mobile apps, and just follow whatever that is.
All right, so, like, I purposely didn't say push notifications a couple minutes ago because I didn't want to confuse that with mobile push notifications.
Yeah.
Meaning that, the little header thing that pops up saying a new episode on YouTube that you subscribe to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know.
Push messages then.
Yeah. That's something.
Yeah.
So I plan on having with just the requirement for now of not having any hard-coded secrets in the code base. I'll just go with my original strategy. And I plan on having all this stuff integrated. Not production ready, but integrated by Monday, right? It can't be that much work. So
just to be clear, you're going to go ahead with the one where you get credentials via another function.
Get credentials from a server via an Azure function. Return those credentials from the Azure function to the client, and persist that data to a local data store. So there's no hard coding. You could say that I just migrated the problem somewhere else, but that's a lot better right now. And I'll deal with that concern later when I'm preparing to publish to production and release it to the public. Then I could make some tweaks and not share how I do it on a public YouTube channel.
Well, yeah. Well, don't send your credentials, right? You can set up another user that you can just shut down, right? A dev user for your ESP. You should be able to set up another user right there.
Hold up, you're saying use credentials per user to connect to a service bus?
Yeah. You can define specific users, can't you?
I could define specific users. I didn't know I could define multiple credentials to access one service bus.
You should be able to.
I never even considered it. Yeah,
you should be able to set up a different user and then give them permissions over whatever you want. So you could say you should be able to say you've got the rights to only read from this queue and message to this queue or something like that. But I mean, it would be better to just throw that up as a burner account if it's possible. I assume it's possible because every other messaging bus has it. I haven't verified that with Azure Service Bus, but you might need to set up and like there's, was it Azure Active Directory or whatever? You might have to set up an account in that, but at least you wouldn't be using your Azure service credentials. You don't want to be posting that around or putting it on the web where anybody can just get it.
All right, that makes sense. So the the perfect trio is so far is have Azure produce unique credentials per user, which makes sense. That should be supported. Two is have a rate limit so that people aren't just arbitrarily making posts that make absolutely no sense but are incurring charges on my account. So use that combination. I don't know what the third one was, but I just wanted to say trio just because. So,
yeah, I mean, I think the best situation would be to have something like would be to have something like identity server or something like that set up, and when you're connected to your device, you actually have an account. You log in, and then you know exactly who's. You have an account that you can actually shut off if you want. So, but I don't know if Azure's like. I don't think you could make per user. Maybe in like a beta context, you could make per user credentials for Azure Service Bus, but I don't think you could do that. I'm not sure you could do that at will and configure it.
I'll probably have to implement that myself and maintain it on the server.
Yeah, I mean, I think my suggestion was more just if you're gonna go with the path where you make a website to get credentials, don't make it your credentials. Just write up a burner account on an Azure Active Directory, give it permissions to. I think, anyways, that this is what you do. Give it permissions to Azure Service Bus to do the minimum amount of stuff that you need it to do for now, and then return those credentials. Because then at least you're not giving away the keys to the kingdom, right? All you're doing is giving away an account that can read and write to a message bus if it needs to. So you're not giving one that can grab it and jump on and be like, hey, I'm going to create a bunch of, service or storage instances and put all my porn stash up there or some stuff like that.
Well, in this case, I mean, it's there's two different things that require credentials. It's the event store to establish a connection, right? And then that's credentials. But then there's Azure, and that's a connection string. I don't think Azure's connection string has credentials embedded in it. It's just literally a unique string or a unique connection string, and that's it. So it would be the event store that someone would put their porn stash on my account. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm not sure about event store. I was thinking of Azure Service Bus, but if you're doing a direct connection to event store, again, I guess you could there is just make the burner account for right now if you just want to ignore it until you actually get the solution out there working. But I mean, I think a more comprehensive authentication and authorization and permission system is probably needed, but
yeah. All right, I'm done talking about security. I'm stressed out. Yeah, I've been in addition to that, I just been taking time to make at least the Courier app more durable. So when I say durable, not lose information in case the app gets unloaded on the. Okay, let me start over. Don't lose any information in the event that the app is closed, and then they have to relaunch the app.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so the app picks up on whatever status or whatever state that order was on. So basically going through exercises trying to corrupt that state, and so and finding issues, and then writing hella conditional statements to alleviate that. So that's what I've also been doing in addition to integration. A lot of the stuff has just been focused on the Courier app. Like I said, I plan on having the service bus integrated and being within a demo state by the end of this weekend. And that's it.
Cool. You considering versioning too, or like updates in that equation? In terms of you go down if the state is version 1, and then you come back up in version 2. Is the state going to be compatible, or would you just reset
I'm not
things?
thinking about that right now.
All right. I assume you'll have, like, if this actually goes live, you're gonna have a lot of iteration on those apps right away. So that'd be
Well, okay, so you're forcing me into the conversation. Like, I thought with Android, I
yeah.
thought that it doesn't ask you permission. It just updates your version of the app. Now, if you're not connected to the internet for a month, then that means you're just not using the app, right? So my thought process is, by default, unless more than likely you tweak your configuration settings for the phone itself, it's just going to upgrade the version of that application.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. What I'm talking about more is like somebody the app crashes while somebody's whatever, they just decide to eat the Denny's themselves and say screw it, and then they it auto updates at some point, but then they relaunch the app, and sounds like it could be well, I don't know, maybe this use case isn't bad.
Oh, so
I always think of like a bajillion edge cases with everything. So
yeah, I remember watching a conference talk. I don't know if it was by Greg Young. See, is that the event source guru that gives a lot of conference talks? I think it is Greg something. Anyway,
yeah,
something I do remember from listening to that talk a couple years ago was, is it really vital, or is it really worth the effort to capture within the software, aka automate 100% of everything in all the cases that could possibly happen? Or is it okay to capture that 98% or that 99.98%, right? And well, the answer is going to say it depends on the number, on the pure number of users that could expose that, right? So if you have 10 million users that are pounding your application every day, then that 99% that you covered, but that 1% that you didn't cover, that's going to be some issues. And as a human being trying to perform manual intervention, that could be overwhelming. I understand that argument. But for an app that will probably have a whopping maybe 20 users in like 2 months, I can configure notifications, which I already put in the infrastructure for. I put in skeleton infrastructure for, in which whenever there is any type of stall between milestones, for example, a courier has has not left the vicinity, or the courier has remained within like 50 yards of a certain area for more than 5 minutes, and they're not at the courier, or they're not at the restaurant, and they're not at the customer drop off, then I'll get notified, and then I can intervene, right? So I have like some skeleton infrastructure that will encourage me to manually step in if something's not right, and I'll just manually fulfill that order somehow, some way, and go log into the database and make whatever tweaks to close that thing out. So I'm not going to try to cover every possible single thing. I will document every possible single thing that happens, and then figure out if that's something that is easy to remedy within code.
Fair
I'm
enough.
gonna start taking our sessions. I'm just gonna start sending it to employers and be like, you know what? I don't need an interview. Here's my technical mentality right now, and then they could grade me on that. All right.
Yeah, and then they can laugh at me. Who's this guy you're talking to? So, well, cool. Yeah, I haven't thought of anything to do yet. Christmas coming up. I don't know, 2020. I don't know. Sometimes I get a itch at the start of the new year to make the year better than the previous year. So maybe that will maybe that will inspire me to do something. I've done something for the last couple of Januaries. I think I've done some things like this last year. In January, I fasted every other day for the month of January, all day. 2 years ago, I did 100 push-ups every day. So January is kind of my month to just do something off the wall. So maybe.
Hold on, let me guess. At the end of January, you just stopped.
Well, I mean, it was time boxed, so the push-up thing I did stop. The fasting one I went for a few more weeks after that, but I think when I hit my birthday, which is in later February, and I'm like, nope. So.
Well, you can always help me build out this mobile dry cleaning.
Have you pivoted to dry cleaning then?
Have I pooed into it?
Pivoted.
Oh. What?
Yeah, have you pooed into your dry cleaning? Of course.
No, I'm doing both because it's the same infrastructure. It's just a different client.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like I would say 80% of that mobile dry cleaning is already written. It's just swapping out the UI. Yeah, there's the back end's done. If I have to add anything for mobile cleaning, it won't take more than 4 weeks worth of 2-hour days. So maybe I just butchered that. Whatever that math is, it won't take that long.
So when do you think you'll get a full integrated end-to-end demo? How far out is that? You should just hackathon it and get it done by the end of the year.
That's in 2 weeks. No,
it's possible.
I would say end of February. End of February, beta. I don't think I've ever stuck with a project this long. At least not for my own hobby project.
Yeah. Well, it's I guess from that standpoint, you've done something that most people have a hard time doing. I haven't been able to focus on anything for more than a few months. So, but I guess, yeah, I don't know.
I'm just surprised it's taken this long. And I keep reminding myself, like, literally I only work like on average, if I say average, I only do probably 2.5 hours a day, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what that really equates to if you were to consolidate that into 40-hour weeks. But I'm still surprised that it's taken this long. It kind of makes you take into
get 2 months per workday, normal workday.
Yeah, but even like, I think we've had this conversation.
No.
Like, who can really go gun ho sustainably doing 8-hour days in which they're just delivering pure 100% value? Like, I think, I mean, I can speak for myself. I think like I could go hard maybe for 5 to 6 hours of just pure code every day. But I can't do 8 hours just pure concentration cranking out things. I'll just start after a while. My mind starts turning into mush, and I'll just start checking email, replying to it, and just start doing the administrative tasks.
Yeah, see, it as long as I'm interested in what I'm doing, I can focus on code for pretty much endless hours. Like those weekends that I do Ludum Dare, the game dev stuff. I mean, that's literally like an 18-hour straight of just coding, usually consistent, focused coding
Yeah,
for
but
2 days.
with an emphasis on sustainability and
Yeah,
take into consideration, right, the world that we live in, where especially within the object oriented part of that code base, they're spending like a third of your time debugging. Could you really do that sustainably in
I don't
full eight
spend that much
hours?
time debugging. I
Uh,
spend that much time maybe like integrate, like emergent, like testing to make sure that there isn't anything emergent that I didn't cover. But there is, but I don't spend a lot of time debugging. Actually, I don't fire up the debugger very often at all. But um,
I do when it not on a hold up. You do back end or do you do front end too?
both.
On the front end, I'm firing up the debugger all the time. Like there's a lot of ceremony, there's a lot
Yeah.
of state everywhere,
Well, I
and
mean, I launched the debugger, but I don't use it very often. I just don't have a need to. Usually, when I observe something wrong, I know exactly why it's wrong. There's occasionally situations where I'm like, why is that happening? I can't explain it, and I do have to walk it. But um,
so you know, I'm pushing you on this. So
oh
you
yeah,
know exactly what's happening with a team of developers that are working in the same code base.
well, I mean, I know the state of the app at any particular time.
Okay.
So I mean, I'm not saying that that's universal. I'm just saying it's rare for me to not know it. And I mean that actually, I think a lot of that goes back to the fact that um, when I first started in programming, we had a debugger, but it wasn't very easy to use. And so I got really used to being more, I think, more detailed with making sure I understood what the heck's going on and covering all of my bases and I don't know, absorbing all the logic and understanding it. Um, because if we did have to do a debugger, it was usually for something really, really nasty, like somebody incremented a pointer somehow by with an array overflow or something like that. Like I had this one time, way long time ago, that literally I compiled an app and it ran just fine. But if I removed a line of comment in the header file of the C code, or no, in the head of the C code, anyways, in the C file, I removed a comment, it changed the runtime behavior. And,
I don't think that's your bug.
well, no, it could have been because it's pointer. The compiler might have just put something off by one line, and that might have been enough to make array overflows or something get off. So there's stuff like that I had to use the debugger for, but um, just nowadays, and I write more in a functional style too with C# now. Um, so I don't really have to do much there. And then for the front end, I don't even know if I know how to launch the. Well, no, I know how to launch the debugger in Chrome and stuff like that, um, I usually will just say, okay, I know it's here, and I might throw a couple console logs in because it's usually the problem will present itself rather quickly. So I
Do
don't
your
know.
coworkers complain with your functional approach?
Not to my face that I know about. I know like when we've onboarded a few people, there's like people don't expect to see result types and maybe types and things like that, and they don't expect to have to handle exceptions, um, or not work with null, and a lot of that there's a lot of that's broken down in terms of we're not super disciplined on it. And I've even lacked some of this of the purity around those things, um, but yeah, so it takes a little bit to get used to. Plus we do a lot of is it I have a lot of method chaining, so I'll do match functions to kind of simulate exhaustive switch cases. Um, and that just I think that tends to confuse people a little bit when you see a lot of uh, it's mostly the people I think that aren't used to dealing with link. Like if you do method chaining in link and you understand and you think to use that before you use a for each to do stuff, then it's not such a bad deal. But but
Do
people
you
are still using for eaches with like and aggregating using lists.
do
In
you
my
completely avoid for each now? I mean, for each
uh,
with the braces.
it depends on the situation, but yeah, most of the time. If I do need a for each to do some sort of mutation or whatever after I've done some sort of other aggregation, I usually just convert the enumerable to a list and then use the for each extension
Yeah.
on that. But yeah, and most of the time don't use for each. I always think of everything in terms of mutating an enumerable.
This is what drives me crazy now. Apparently, I'm bougie, right? But what drives me crazy, and I think it probably does the same thing for you, just listening to you talk about the code base, is when I see variables, and it's kind of like an oxymoron, but when I see variables uh, continuously reassigned to different values within a method, that drives me crazy.
Yeah, versus chaining. Yeah,
I'm like, it drives me crazy. I mean, I
yeah,
deal with it in the code base that I'm working on, and I mean, I do a good job just keeping my mouth shut and not venting to anybody. But it's like it'll be like 100 line method, and I see the same value, or I see the same variable get reassigned different values like 4 or 5 different times. I'm like,
yeah. Sometimes I'll do stuff like that because it's in C sharp. You know, it's not like F sharp where it's condensed. So the more dense you make stuff, the harder is it to read. So sometimes there's like a for people who are more imperative, which I think is a lot of the or object oriented, which is probably a lot more people that I work with. Spreading that out over a couple lines and making more discrete steps uh, helps. And also it's easier to like with match function or sorry with like maybe types and stuff like that. Sometimes it is easier to take an imperative approach and just go if this has a value or doesn't have a value return because I'm going to mutate that to an error anyways. Or I'm going to mutate, or I'm going to send back some other thing right away, anyways, and then continue on, assign the actual value out, and continue on. So I intersparse the imperative stuff in there occasionally. But yeah, I've had some really long sets of like chaining, and and people come in and they're just like, "What the hell is this?" So, but actually, my one of my biggest pet peeves now is this idiom is declaring an empty list and then doing a for each on a another collection and then aggregating those things into the list and then returning the list at the end. Um,
you mean declaring and instantiating the list, and then overriding that instantiated list with the actual values that are needed?
sort of, yeah. So like so people do like let's say you're going to have you had a collection of let's say customer objects and you wanted to filter out you know customers that are over 10 weeks old or that have been there. You wanted to filter out anyone who's been a customer for more than a month, and then you wanted to just select their first and last name, right? So I think you and I would probably code that as customers dot where is less than 10 years old, select you know, first name, last name, whatever, and then that's return. Boom, done. You might do a to list or something to realize it if you need to, but the other approach that I see is like list result customers for each customer in customer. If
Yeah.
customer is whatever, and if customer is blah blah blah, then create new object, and then return result customer list dot add new customer. Then at the very end, return the list.
Yeah, that was me
That
probably 5 years ago.
that much versus that much. Yeah, yeah. So that's something that I've gotten away from. Like I used to do that a lot more too, and there's still reasons I might do it for like async and some other stuff, um, but this, but whenever I see that, I'm like, this is obviously the case where you use filters and maps and reduce and whatever. So, but yeah, that drives me nuts now to see that, because I'm like,
I
there's
mean,
a much easier way to do it.
you're already thinking in that paradigm. I don't understand why you don't know F sharp.
Yeah, it's just I think I could grok it. I just haven't had the need and or the motivation to get in there and do it. But
Do
I
you
mean, I
write
think the syntax is all I need to learn, I think.
do you write unit tests at work?
Yeah.
There's your opportunity.
Yeah. Well, except for unit tester code too, maintained by the team, and I don't want to force the team. And I did think about writing this other service I was writing in F sharp, but what I ended up doing was modeling the domain in F sharp as best I could, and then I realized that and then I just wrote it in C sharp anyways. But um, constructing stuff in this tiny little file to define what the actual nature of the data and everything was, and the relationships actually helped a lot, just from a thinking process. So
It looks a lot. I don't know. I still can't articulate, with emphasis on articulate, why it's easier for me to model in F sharp types than it is in C sharp interfaces. I don't know why, but like it's just easy for me to flesh out the spec in F sharp than to use C sharp interfaces. I can't explain why. It's just my map. I'll get into flow as I'm writing out the types, and then I'm doing a proliferation of a whole bunch of other types that all somehow work in harmony with one another. But when I get to interfaces, it's just I can't get into flow. Like I don't know how to explain it any other way. It's
yeah,
like it's hard for me. I I don't model using C sharp interfaces and be like, yep, I think this looks well, or this looks good. This is how I'm going to move forward. I never do that. I'll start with, and here's the thing, like, so in C sharp, in order for me to model, um, I'll more than likely I'll just do TDD, right? In F sharp, I just start using types, and I'll iterate on those types, and then eventually I'll plug those types into a proof of concept, writing an automated test. Like my workflow is completely different between the two languages.
yeah. I mean, I think the problem is that interfaces don't really aren't really a domain. I mean, they might be in a domain, but they're not. You don't really model a domain with interfaces. You can't do things like represent, union types or discriminated unions or anything like that. You can't declare what all of the children of that interface are going to be. I only really use interfaces for boundary, to describe contracts with boundaries where it's outside the domain. So like, if I'm in a quote or something, there's a part service, I'll be like, this is what the part service looks like inside the domain, and then the implementation is elsewhere. But I don't. Yeah, I mean, I think otherwise, to do that, you have to create a bunch of objects in C sharp, and that's considerably heavier than and across files, because that's
Yeah.
the idiomatic way to do it, right? which I hate now. I really hate that I have to open up a brand new file for a tiny little, 3-line interface or something like that. But
Well, you don't have. Do,
I
do you
don't.
really do that? You really have that rule for every single class?
No, but I don't anymore. I've deviated from that, but there's plenty of C# developers that expect it. And I think we even had rules at one time, and before I kicked out the linters or the static analysis, we kind of dumped it, but I think we even had a rule that it was 1 unit per file. So I hate that though, because it spreads it out, and I just like, why don't I just put this all in one place?
So I sep- I have a separate file per class for per C# class for most things except for my renderers. So for example, um, I'll have my view model files, but like if for whatever reason I have to create a class that supports how that data is going to be rendered, um, I just feel like it's stupid for me to. It's so related to that view model, right? The rendering information. It's stupid for me to put that in a separate file because it's only like you said, it's like 3 or 4 lines, and it's tightly coupled. It's not going to be used for anything else but that view model, right? And so I include that in the same file. We have some people that use nested classes, which I've never used.
I use them now for to achieve, like, if I want to try to model like more of like a union type. So the way that I do that is, so here's an example. I was adding a model for an archiving context the other day, and there was the abstraction is archive context, but there's, let's say, 3 or 4 different contexts, and each one of those might have some different properties but described in the context. So I have the base class, abstract class, archive context, and then I do a private constructor, and then I have nested classes that do the actual implementations for the specific types, right? And then I have a match function at that abstract level that will ensure exhaustive checking for whenever I do it. It takes some discipline, but it works really well. I've
Yeah.
had situations where, it's like I'm adding a new case to this switch, and what's great is I change in that one match function, and everywhere in the application that needs to know about it is immediately tells me where, and I just go fix them and I'm done. So I go handle it wherever it needs to be handled, and then it's like poof, done with this change. It's not searching around the code base trying to figure out where did people actually care about this, this abstract class ever in this app. So
Yeah, I don't think I'll ever get to that point.
yeah, but it's a lot. It's heavy though, so you're adding and then it's kind of a bitch to work with, because you have to, like, you have to go superclass dot, and you could use using static, but a superclass dot subclass, new that up, and then you have to, if you want to get it back into the base class, you might have to do an as whatever just to get it mutated back into.
So do you do all that in one file?
Yeah.
You could theoretically use partial classes to represent each nested class.
Yeah. I don't, the thing is, that's what I was saying at first. I don't want to. It's like all of these things are related concepts, and I need to know
Okay.
them.
Yeah.
It's
Well, okay. What I meant was you can use partial classes to accomplish the same thing, but you use the combination of partial classes with a file nester, meaning that just like your okay, so you're familiar with that too. So you expand your root file, and you have a whole bunch of child files.
Yeah. When I interviewed you for my podcast way back when I had one, that you talked about that as a practice that you use that nobody else does. So
yeah, I usually brag about stuff like that.
Yeah. Is that supported by default now in Visual Studio, or is that
I think it's
an extension?
so in like WPF and So the short answer is it used to be, but then in Xamarin Forms specifically, I can't do it anymore.
Hmm.
Um, Honestly, I don't know if I was ever able to do it in Xamarin Forms, but I think you can do it in like I don't know. I don't know. I used to be able to do it, and based on the type of solutions that I work on, which is usually mobile, it won't let me.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if you could do it in Web API. You should because so many people use Web API. I'm almost positive that there's some people that have requested that. So it should be supported. But mobile is so, or Xamarin Forms is so niche or niche. Which one?
I use niche
It's so niche
or
that
niches. Dang it. I don't know what I use. I guess it depends on the
yeah.
context.
Anyway, make long story short, if I were doing that, I would probably use that type of technique where it's still consolidated, but if you want additional details per case, and it kind of like complements your discriminated union, per file, then I would use that approach. Of course, I
Yeah.
haven't done it in practice, but
I've used like folder structures to do it before, and it's just like, man. Like I said, normally these classes are really quite small because they're mostly just data, as they kind of should be with the style that I'm using. They're data, and then usually like some match functions or helper functions like that, and maybe some static constructors or whatever. But they're usually quite small. But yeah, they're all kind of every case that you need to know about, and the match function should be updated to kind of handle it. So I don't know. I'm still waiting for somebody to just grill me on why I structured it that way when it's not idiomatic C sharp. But
are you the most senior?
I don't know.
You don't,
No.
you don't know who you work with?
Well, I know there's people who are senior, and I think no, I'm pretty sure they've got some years of experience on me, but I don't. But technically, with the company we're at, other than the one who works with me who's not really coding anymore, I've worked at the company longer than anyone else that's doing development on my team. So I don't know. It's kind of weird, even though I'm a contractor. But I don't know.
Oh,
Anyways,
I think I want to wrap it up.
yeah, I was waiting for the sun to come out or to get lighter, but we're at that point where everything's dark.
It's been cloudy and rainy for the last 2 days down here in Miami. Yeah. All right.
Boo-hoo.
I guess it's snowing up there. It's ice.
It's just bleak. It's bleak outside.
All right, it's been real. I learned a lot this session.
That's my outside.
I don't even, do I even have a back camera or no? So what? You turn your laptop around?
This is a webcam. So
yeah, I'm looking at palm trees, but it's been real. I learned a lot about security and a whole bunch of other stuff. So thanks.
All right.
We still got to bring you out of retirement. We'll catch up.
Yeah, and New Year's resolution. So
100 push-ups. All right. See ya.
All right. See you. Bye.